when I met BJ, I was immediately impressed with his fluency in Chinese and a little surprised to find out he had learned the bulk of his Mandarin attending a cooking school in Beijing, as he will soon tell you. I also know BJ to be one of the funnier, quicker-witted people I've met in my life. When he came to visit last summer to participate in our Young Americans in China video, one of my staff members remarked that BJ spoke the best Chinese of any foreigner she had ever met. So, combining BJ's gift for learning Chinese, his wonderful sense of humor, and the fact that he agreed to be our keynote speaker, the choice seemed obvious. Ladies and gentlemen of CLAM, I give you the owner and president of B. Moyars Consulting, a graduate of Purdue University, and the Beijing Jingsong Vocational School, not to mention an avid beekeeper and a bagua enthusiast, Benjamin Moyars.
其实我的中文不好，他都骗你们了。Thank you, Dr. Brainerd. It's nice to be in Detroit. It's a little bit bigger of a city than I'm used to. I almost even made it to Canada last night, not on purpose, but apparently because my GPS needs to be updated. There's a bridge, and that bridge is not the bridge that you want to connect to when you're trying to get to Wayne State, apparently. But they're friendly. They're really, really friendly. That is true. Anyway, I realize it's mid-morning. The coffee's starting to wear off, so everybody's getting a little tired. But it's important to stay awake, so if you see me falling asleep, walk up and kick me or something. It's okay. And I know that I am the only person separating, well, the door is as well, but separating you and the food, which is why I picked this spot here, because I will beat you there. Anyway, a little bit about my background. Like you said, I'm from the big grand state of Indiana. I'm actually from Northwest Indiana, from a farm originally. The big city near me has about 2,400 people. Not all of them are Chinese. But I've always had a curiosity about languages, whether it be Spanish, Gaelic, Redneck, just any of the dialects that we have. I did take 3 years of Spanish in high school because really in high school that was our cultural introduction, if you will. And we had Spanish and we had French. And so I thought, well, crap. So I'll take Spanish. And I took 3 years of it, actually. But at the same time, I was always interested in other cultures. I was always the guy that bought like the little pocket dictionary in the bookstore when I should have been buying textbooks. Buy those instead and just look up words and try to see who I could upset in some other language. But that kind of curiosity towards cultures and languages has always stuck with me. This is my hometown. It's there somewhere, but sadly that's actually almost true. My high school does sit right in the middle of a cornfield. Why I wanted to start learning Chinese. China's really deep-rooted in, I'm sorry, this is actually not true. The actual reason that I started learning Chinese was because my college at Purdue, where I just finished my indentured servitude, the amazing 9 years, they had a 1 semester foreign language requirement. And I tried to, I thought, well, this will be easy. I'll test out of Spanish. I could not. So it was a very poor performance. The kind where you get up early and then as you're leaving, they're like, oh, you didn't finish. And you're like, no, I did. That's okay. We've done all the damage we can here. But I thought it'd be cool to be able to say a few words in a foreign language, especially maybe an Asian language. That'd be neat. That might get me a date. Still didn't. But and I actually studied entomology, insects. That doesn't get you dates either. But I thought it would be neat, and so I was like, well, Japanese, that'll do the trick. We'll do Japanese. Well, there's a waiting list. It was full, so I said, I'll take Chinese. It's just 1 semester. What could it hurt, right? So some of my first realizations I had from Chinese class. At that time, now I will say in Purdue's defense now, this is not the case. They do a very good job of filtering out a lot of native speakers in some of the 101 classes. I am as old as time for an undergrad, and so at that time they actually didn't have that plan in effect, and so a lot of my classmates were actually native Chinese speakers from China that were taking Chinese to raise their GPA. I can't blame them. I tried to take an English class at my cooking school, and they wouldn't let me in. And actually, the English teacher there did avoid me like the plague. But characters, the interesting thing is because, like I said, you saw my hometown there just a second ago, the characters just look like pictures to me. I couldn't actually distinguish anything. And so for a foreigner, you guys are lucky because a lot of you, you're used to this, but for a foreigner, it's just a picture. And I have a lot of people say, how do you separate those? And I say, I just pretend, and they go along with it. But actually, no. I mean, there's obviously stroke orders, but to a person who first sees it, it does look like pictures, and that was a very big challenge for me to try to get through. It was a cool sounding language. It sounded to me like someone singing, sort of. They were singing, but still, it was a neat language. Anyway, I was always in this constant state of confusion. Like the dream where you're trying to get out, but the window doesn't open, but you don't know why. And nothing's really clear. That's always how I felt in Chinese class. It could be because I was really the only white person in there, but it was just this kind of a haze, and I just couldn't find my niche and just connect. And Chinese was not going to raise my GPA. It's going to take a great deal of convincing, but maybe I could tell some of you what my some of those classes resulted in grade-wise. Not great. So yeah, I really started to kind of doubt my abilities as a language learner. But why would I stick with it then? It was horrible. It was awful, right? But why would I actually stick around if it was really that bad? But they kept passing me. I don't know. I remember 2 semesters in general. I know 2 final exams that I turned in my exam, and they said, see you next semester, and I said, no, you won't. No, this is awful. And they said, no, it's okay. And they did. They kept passing me. And so I didn't want to disappoint them. I felt guilty. The Chinese are great at the guilt trip, and so I guess I got to keep doing it. So I stuck with it. So I needed a solution. I was trying to find a way to improve my Chinese, escape from some warrants, and so I thought, why not fly to China? And so now looking back on it, it wasn't quite the best planned trip because there's no better time to do something than tomorrow. That's kind of my motto. And so I did not plan very well. And so I just got on a plane by myself and flew to China. It was more detailed than I had to get a visa. But really, that's what I did. I literally just got on a plane to go to China. I tried to go through study abroad at Purdue. The details didn't work out. I was able to get myself in a language program. And so I was going to go to Tsinghua University and do a 4-month language immersion program. So I thought, how different can China really be? This literally, as you can see the windmills, this is where I live, basically. That's true. It can't be that different. Has anyone played the game Frogger before? If you play the game Frogger, you can download on the iPhone, but you're a little frog, right? And you're trying to skip through the bicycles and buses and everything like that. And when you're from an area where when someone honks the horn, it means they recognize you and they're saying hello. And the first person honks the horn, you're like, ah! And the bus goes in front of you and 8 bicycles go behind you. It was scary. It was a big culture shock. So I got myself to Tsinghua University. I was there to take a 4-month language immersion program, which I started. So I started. That's how encouraging that statement was. But the problems that I had with Tsinghua, it's a great school, and they started this language program. But some of the problems that I had with it was that it was still a classroom. But it was in China, so the environment was correct, right? The other problem, though, was that a lot of and I can't blame them, but a lot of the Chinese teachers wanted to practice English with me because I'm a native speaker. You may not know this by looking at me, but I am very good at English. I've spoken a long time, and so they wanted to capitalize on that, and a lot of the other students were foreigners, and so they wanted to practice English with me, and so I paid, I believe, 9,000 RMB to go for 1 semester to Tsinghua for 4 months. Then I would come home, and I would speak in Chinese to my neighbors. And I thought, well, that's kind of free, but I'm paying money to go there and speak English. But my English is okay, so why am I... So I kind of thought this was a little odd. And then my landlords were actually very good to me, I think because they were worried I'd die if they didn't take care of me. And so they were very good, and they would take me out all the time, and so I kind of get some opportunities from them. And I thought, well, this is just not working out. And so I started kind of developing some friendships and contacts and getting a few jobs. And then I discovered Yang Char. If you've not met this woman, she's the finest lady that you'll ever meet in your life. She's always there for you about 2 a.m. At a Xinjiang restaurant. Anyway, I survived the first about month in Beijing on Cheez-Its. Cheez-Its, go to Walmart. Yeah, this is the wrong crowd, but go to Walmart. Know your audience. So go to Walmart, and it's in a red box. It's just a little box of magic, and that is what just my mother would send me, just processed goods from the U.S. and I would ration them literally because I was scared that if I went outside, that a taxi driver might ask me, "Where are you from?" And I would be like, "I don't know what you're saying." So, but I finally discovered food, and it really you can tell it's been a long relationship here by looking at me, but. How do I know those were popular? Well, actually, that was all me. So I wanted to learn about food because every time I go into a grocery store, the Chinese grocery stores are a lot different. I really miss them now, but they're a lot different. But the grocery stores, no matter where you go, are always cool because it's always got what the local people eat, and it was very confusing to me, and I knew I needed to learn more about that. And so my landlord. I was kind of big into food in the U.S. and cooking, and so they agreed to try to help me get into a cooking school, and they did. And I was the only foreigner to go through that school. I think the only person to be able to speak English at that school. But they were very, very good to me, and they didn't treat me like a foreigner because they just never taught any. A chef is not a language teacher. A chef is a horrible, horrible man that just likes to just berate you and beat you down about who you are. But you come out of it learning quite a bit. And so I thought, this school's pretty fun. I'm not going to learn any Chinese, but learn how to cook, right? And that's got to be better for dating than entomology and insects and all that. So I put down the dictionary, picked up my knife, and I started at cooking school. When I got to the cooking school, it was a very, very traumatic realization that I had just gotten in over my head. Just like when I had gotten off the plane in China, it was like, I'm in China. This cooking school, the teacher was from Beijing. I still to this day don't know if I speak more Beijing dialect or if it's Mandarin or what, because the teacher was from Beijing. He would speak to me, and if I didn't understand, he would speak louder and faster. Which I feel like I should get some sympathy from this room because that's your language teachers. And I remember he'd just get really frustrated with me and say, "去拿一个汤盘?" And so I would run into the pantry like, okay, he wants me to find something that sounds like tongue par. What could that be? And so I would just start loading my arms up with things, right, and walk over. And it was just a really horrible experience, just stress-wise for the first month. Then it started to actually click with me. And then the next month, and then the next month after that, and I just stayed with it. And I started to get better at cooking. But what I didn't realize was my language was improving at the same time. I was actually getting much, much better at language because I was scared of the man. And when you're scared, you learn very quickly. The interesting thing about that teacher was I got to the point where I could even Chinese people said that man's hard to understand. But I got to the point though where I could understand him, but I could also understand his subtleties. And I know that when you stand in front of this is a table. This table's actually slanted. Water will pour down and goes to the drain. But anyway, when you're standing over a wok, you have a spoon, like a big like a lo shao. What to help me out? A slotted spoon that's hanging up on the top. And that handle, you need to turn it away from the fire, right? But I started learning this man's subtleties, and I know that when you're standing over that and you have the handle over the fire, and when the chef behind you goes, that means you're about to get hurt. And one day I did actually grab that metal handle and screamed, and I said, "Why did you tell me?" He said, "Now you remember." Good times. So what I did for myself after this kind of realization was that I kind of came up with a prime directive for myself. You don't actually have to call it that, but I'm a nerd. So does anyone watch Star Trek? Wrong audience again. Dang it. Star Trek is Next Generation. Don't bother with the others. They have what's called a prime directive, and theirs is to do no harm and not interfere with any primitive cultures. my prime directive, it's basically a mission statement for yourself. And my prime directive was going to be to do anything I wanted to in China, as long as it doesn't have a negative impact on my Chinese learning ability. As long as whatever I'm doing has something to do with Chinese and the language, whether it be cooking school, a job. An American DVD is okay if you're watching with Chinese friends and explaining why you think it's funny, and yes, you realize that it's actually not funny to them in Chinese. As long as it has to do with language, you're okay. And so some of the ways I did this was I spent time with my neighbors. This lady and her husband behind her, very, very nice to me. And so they would take me to the markets, local markets and that kind of thing. And so I got to know them pretty well. I also met this man. I needed my knife sharpened. I'm a cooking student, right? And I said, how do I know when I need knife sharpened? They say, oh, you'll hear the knife sharpener come by. I'm like, you'll hear him? And lo and behold, this man does ride his bicycle singing Mojian Model. Yeah, so he's in work. Spend time with friends. This is actually the chef teacher. This man's a non-legitimate taxi driver. He's a purveyor of things. I don't know. And he said he was a doctor, but he said if I needed medicine, he could get it. But he doesn't actually work at a hospital. I don't. I made a lot of close friends though. When I came back to America, 90% of my contacts in China were Chinese, and they were actual friends, not language partners. I really want to say really quick, the thing about language partners is to learn a language, at least for me, you have to be selfish in order to get the language. And there's like the gun draw showdown when you meet someone and you decide if you're going to speak their language or they're going to speak yours. And you have to be selfish. And so the problem with language partners is you always want to get more for yourself, and it doesn't always work out that way. So find true friends. Most of my friends didn't want to speak English and could care less about speaking English, especially my chef. I spoke English once and he said, what's that? He said, don't do that again. Okay. Anyway, I kept in touch with friends using QQ, ran along. I needed a job, so I've had several jobs throughout my time in China. Everything from being an actor as the head of a French diamond company in front of a big hall of people in Tangshan. That was nerve-wracking. To some voice dubbing. If you buy a LG phone, cell phone in Korea, that's my voice. They still will not let me do the voice for the subway in Beijing. I'm working on that one. So anyway, I started kind of thinking about what kind of my complaints were about classroom learning from back in the day. We didn't focus enough on speaking, and we didn't learn the real Chinese. This is a quote, I feel embarrassed to speak to my classmates in Chinese, and I also feel that my classmates will think I'm showing off if I speak to my teacher in Chinese. For a lot of Americans, this is a real feeling. This is kind of how I felt. I was embarrassed to speak. I didn't want to speak up. So I had an opportunity to go teach English because I needed money. And so I went and I taught English, and I thought, well, why not try some of this stuff in my classroom? So here's kind of how I made mine different. The kids all addressed me by my first name, not Moyars, BJ. So addressed me by my first name. I gave them English names that made sense. I had the whole cast of South Park in front of me. I had... Try naming 60 kids different names. You can't do it, right? So we had Prison Break, we had everyone, and so, and a lot of my friends, but they made sense to me. They fit that name. And so it stuck with them a little better. I showed them American videos that I like to watch. I made them listen to American music that I like to listen to. I don't care if they don't know who Willie Nelson is. But I didn't really consider whether it was conducive to learning. I wanted them to hear the culture. I also played games with them that Americans would play. A lot of Hangman, so that is kind of a language game, but a lot of different games. This was the other thing was when I talked to them, I'm not talking as fast as now, but we're running low on time. I still talked in my normal American voice. I didn't slow down and do the kind of baby talk game. I have a lot of Chinese people still to me say 你叫什么名字? I say 你总是说话那么慢吗? Talking really slow like that is obvious that that's not how people talk. But I repeated myself constantly. And if you ask, how are you? And they say, fine. Why are you fine? So why are you fine? Why are you tired? And so I would ask things like that. A lot of slang, a lot of conjunctions. Can't, not can, not. It's good if you're giving a speech like this, and I should have been speaking more professional English, but that's how people really speak, and it's the same in Chinese. And I'd tell them any word they wanted to know. I don't care, any word. It's motivation, right? Why not? That's the first thing you do when you get a dictionary is you look up the bad words. That's just me. But people still want to know these things, so just teach them whatever they want to know. But I did have assistants that also taught from the textbook, so I can't take all this credit that I made some realization with them. So you do have to do some classroom work, especially the first year. But the results I had was they were starting to resemble American students in class, which was really kind of odd. And my coworkers were complaining that they were always too noisy in class and wanted to call them by their first name and everything else. And so, and that they were just not being well-behaved students. And I thought, yes, that's good. They didn't call me Lao Shi. Even students that had no English were able to speak and at least tell me how their day went. So some of the things that I saw, some of the keys in language is you need distractions from learning a language, like I did with cooking, right? You need to find a distraction for them so they don't realize they're learning a language. When you start realizing you're learning a language, that's all that you'll want to look at. And you need motivation. My biggest obstacle in learning a language, and maybe some other people, embarrassment. I'm just scared to speak. When I would go to a Chinese restaurant when I first started learning, and they would give me food, I'd say, xie xie. Right, really, really quiet. And they'd say, huh? And they'd say, what? Oh, nothing. You know, I was scared to speak. Anyway, assure students that they're going to make mistakes, right? Share your own mistakes with them. Just one quick mistake I used to make a lot. And if you really want to hear the most embarrassing story I think that I've had in learning Chinese, which I'm not going to tell in front of a group this big, so come this afternoon. That's our campaign. I'll tell you then. But when I used to leave a restaurant and they would say manzo, I would say nia manzo. Then I realized, like, oh, but you can't go back in time. So tell them these kind of mistakes. Be a human being to them. Stop being a teacher that's holding your clipboard over them. Undercover cops get a lot more information out of people because they don't look like a cop, so don't look like a teacher. Teach real Chinese, again. The same style of Chinese that you would speak to your own friends, that you speak when you go home at the end of the day. You don't need a guy when someone says to him, oh, ni hen shuai, and he says, nali, nali. Not great for a guy, maybe, but you could just say, aha, xie xie, and just teach them these kind of, like, haha. A lot of students in 101 can't write haha, right? Anyway, so some things to consider. What are people going to do when they walk up to someone? Unless they have a chalk and a piece of slate, they're probably going to speak. So I'd say focus a lot more on being able to speak. And how many minutes does each student actually speak during each classroom? Shengdiao, the tones, right, is pretty important. A lot of people blanket and cup, don't know the difference. Just a couple examples here from people. Someone saying they want, every time they think they're asking for soup, but they're using the wrong tone, and so they bring them candy and say, you should eat better. So some words, just to give you an example to help them remember words, like yao. So right, xi and yao is xi and yu is yao. So 我要一个西方的女朋友. You can help them remember these things, right? xi and yao and yu. Adopt a Western personality. Make fun of yourself. You know, John and I, we joke with each other constantly. That's just American Western sense, and the students will relate to that, and it helps with the language. Ask them questions about American culture. If they realize they have the same problems that you did when you're learning, and as you're learning, it'll help make them a lot more comfortable. More koyu, right? Try to keep English speaking down as much as you can, and make them communicate as much as possible, no matter what that is. And you'll see their face. If they just start to drift off and are lost, that'll be pretty obvious. And so you kind of want to then back up and repeat yourself. Just keep building their confidence. You might just pretend you don't know what they're saying in English. That helps. I do that all the time with Americans. That was like a joke, but not funny. So some things that you can do. Teach about other parts of Chinese life, right? You've got food, you've got games, relationships, especially if you're teaching college, they're going to want to know about that kind of stuff. Teach them about guanxi and shopping, anything, just to get them away from thinking they're learning the language. That's the key, is they're not there to learn the language. They're there to learn something else, but the language will come. Teach them about culture. Some Americans might not know why that napkin's folded differently. And I'm not going to tell you right now if you don't. They might not know what hot pot is, right? Who would know what this place was if you didn't know what KTV culture was in China, right? As an American. So these are kind of some things you might take for granted, but Americans don't know about. Teach them from a menu. You don't want this place as a Hong Shao Liu Mian. You want the Jia Jia Mian. That's important, right? So teach them what kind of some characters. If they're going to order off a menu, that's really intimidating for a foreigner to see a menu all in Chinese and just do the point game. So some teaching advice. This is long, and I gave a speech last night to him about how I hate how people put text in their PowerPoints, and then I do it. But play games with them, like Scheidze, you know, the dice game, and that's great to keep them thinking, because they're trying to figure out how to bluff and lie, but they need to use the language at the same time. Play Shasho. I played Shasho in English with my students. Shasho, 哦，我的声调不对是吧？ Teach them websites like Keynote, QQ, 校内人人网. So teach them kind of some of the equivalents to American websites. And make sure that it's not that convenient for them to talk to you in English. If it's not convenient, they won't feel embarrassed speaking in Chinese, because that's just what they have to do. So in summary, you might encourage them to try to use the method I used. Like I said, prime directive. No matter what you're doing, it always has something to do with language learning. But you shouldn't realize that that's what you're doing. And as a teacher, that's something that you can do, is try to give them kind of that introduction to your culture, to your life, but not the ancient mystical Chinese culture, right? You know, just like the kao hongshu on the street, you know, you're going to see that, and that's pretty good, but don't eat the outside because it's a little dirty. There's little things, you know, about daily life that once you get there, that you don't know, and you need to know these things, sometimes almost more important than learning idioms. I washed my clothes with fabric softener for the first month because I didn't know the difference in characters. My mother, when she came to visit, her hair got frizzier and frizzier, and she was using conditioner to wash her hair for the week. She had no shampoo. These are the kind of things that you don't think about, right? So maybe make a list. What did you first need to know when you got to America? It's probably not going to be that much different when you get to China. You know, there's some differences in culture, but those daily things, that's what's important, and that's what makes people think that, you know, your language is, oh, this person's language is decent, because he can speak and communicate regularly. Make them have a need to talk to you in Chinese, not just because it's for a test. Really quickly, before I'm done here, next time you try to do a quiz, and if you look right before you're about to pass out that quiz, I can guarantee you, because of American personality, there's at least one student like me, probably more, that are furiously trying to memorize all the words, right? Has anybody seen this when they were doing a quiz? Okay, that's because that's when they started studying it. So maybe not, but they're not remembering it because they want to remember. They're remembering it because you're going to give them a bad grade on the quiz. So give that quiz to them. Then at the end of class, now that they're safe, give them that quiz again really quick and see what happens. See, you don't have to take it for a grade because they're going to say, is this for a grade? No, just see and see what that tells you. Maybe that means that they're learning the language just to appease you and get a grade, not because they're wanting to learn the culture. Whatever your motivation is, though, it's important to have motivation. You don't need to be the teacher. You can be their boss because you have to do homework, you know, but you don't have to be a language teacher. Like I said, my chef was probably one of the best language teachers I've ever had, and he could care less about my language abilities, right? But don't be intimidating, and then have fun. Have fun with yourself. Humor is really a great way to get through to your students. Bring yourself down on their level. You're a unique set of people because you're language teachers, and you have to get through embarrassment. Not many other classes or majors are going to have embarrassment that people need to get through with their students, but you do. They have a huge wall to get through. So make yourself funny. Tell embarrassing stories about yourself. Remember, everyone feels small when they're learning a language. It's actually Shouguang, the vegetable capital of China. That is literally as exciting as it sounds. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come out.